We're moving right along in Chapter 2, and we're going to look today at problem solving and dimensional analysis. This is in section 2.6 of your textbook. Anytime that we have a conversion problem, it's considered dimensional analysis. So when we need to get from one system to another, and you had a little bit of exposure to this earlier in the chapter, but we're going to actually write out the steps and figure out how to do these problems and set them up the right way in this section. So the first thing we're going to have to do is convert from one unit to another by using equivalent statements. So you have to know what relates the two units. Second of all, you need to choose that conversion factor, and you need to set it up to where the units cancel. If you cannot cancel your units, you've got it set up wrong. We'll then multiply the quantity to be converted by the conversion factor, and that's going to give us the units that we desire. We also need to check and make sure that we have the right number of sig figs. I don't focus on that as much in Chem 1. In college, you definitely will have to, but we're going to look at that right at the beginning, the correct number of sig figs. And then you have to ask yourself, does my answer make sense? Because if the answer doesn't make sense, there's a problem with it, but you need to be able to recognize that. We're going to take a look at 3 examples today, step by step. So the first one says, a golfer putted a golf ball 6.8 feet across a green. How many inches does this represent? And this is a really common conversion because we're going from feet to inches, and this is one that you're familiar with. So to convert from one unit to another, we're going to use the equivalent statement that relates it. And you know by memory that 1 foot is the same thing as 12 inches. The 2 unit factors or conversion factors we could use are 1 foot over 12 inches, or we could use 12 inches over 1 foot. It just depends on how we need to set it up to cancel feet and leave inches. So we choose the appropriate conversion factor by looking at the direction of the required change. So I have 6.8 feet, and I want to change that to inches. So in order to get that to cancel, the feet to cancel, I'm going to have to put feet on bottom and inches on top, which requires me to take 6.8 feet times 12 and divide it by 1, but divided by 1 doesn't change the answer. So we're going to multiply 6.8 times 12 and get 82 inches. Did I keep the right number of sig figs? Well, it's multiplication, so I have 2 sig figs in this part. I never have to worry about how many sig figs are in my conversion because that's unlimited, so we're not even going to take those into consideration. I have 2 in my problem, so I keep 2 in my answer. Does that make sense? I know that there's 12 inches in a foot. I have over 6 feet, so I know I should have over 80 inches or so. So I look at this and go, yeah, that sounds like a reasonable answer. Look at example number 2. An iron sample has a mass of 4.5 pounds. What's the mass of the sample in grams? Now, on this problem, these are things that you don't necessarily know from memory, the conversions, so you have to look them up in your textbook or look on your reference sheet. So they give those to you here. We have 4.5 pounds, and I want to go from pounds to grams. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to take pounds and convert it to metric, which is going to be kilograms. And I can find this conversion factor on my chart, and it says 2.2046 pounds. This is the same as 1 kilogram. And I put pounds on bottom because I want to be able to cancel those out. If I would have put 1 kilogram on bottom, I wouldn't be able to cancel my pounds. The next thing is I want to take kilograms and change it to grams. So there are 1,000 grams in a kilogram, so I can put kilograms on bottom again to be able to cancel out the kilograms. Now it's time to do the math portion of it. What you're going to do is you're going to take 4.5 times 1 divided by 2.2046 times 1,000 and then divided by 1. And remember, the multiply by 1 and the divide by 1 aren't necessary, but if you just want to get into a habit of doing that, it will help you make sure that you don't skip a step. And you get 2.04 times 10 to the 3rd grams. Okay, the next question we need to ask ourselves is how many sig figs should we end up with in our answer? So we look at our problem. In our problem, we have 3 sig figs. So we have 4 and 5 because those are both non-zeros. And this 0 is trailing the decimal point and trailing a non-zero, so it's considered a trailing 0. So we have 3 sig figs in our original problem. Remember, we never take into account the number of sig figs in the conversions because they're unlimited. So our problem can only have 3. So it's 2.04 times 10 to the third, and that gives us 3 sig figs in the answer. And we ask ourselves, is it reasonable? And to the best of our knowledge, yes, it is a reasonable answer. Let's look at example 3. This is one of the problems that you have for homework tonight, so let's take special notice of it. It says, given that 1 mile is 1,760 yards, what conversion factor is appropriate to convert 1,849 yards to miles? So the question is, am I going to use 1 mile over 1,760 yards, or will I use 1,760 yards over 1 mile? Well, I have yards on top, and I want miles on top, so I'm going to use a conversion factor that's going to allow yards to be canceled out. So I'm going to have to use the first one right here and put yards on bottom and 1 mile on top. Cancel my yards, and that should give me miles for my answer. And that part of the question here says set up each problem. That's what I would expect. Then the next one is to convert 200.87 miles to yards. So which one of the two am I going to use? Well, I have miles on top. I want yards on top. So I'm going to have to use the one that has yards on top and miles on bottom, and cancel those, and that will give me yards on top. So just a couple more things to just keep in your mind while you're doing these problems. If you cannot cancel it, you didn't set it up right. There's always a way to get from point A to point B, from the problem to the answer, but you may have to take, just like the example before this one, more than one step to get there. And you'll find these conversions on your conversion chart that I handed out to you, or in your textbook. And if you're not quite sure, you can't seem to find those, if you just let me know, and we'll see if we can't find those together for you to add to your chart. The best way to do these is to practice. Make sure you always show your work. No work, no credit. So if I don't see all this written out in the answer, you get no credit for it. So show your work. Let's practice.